Okay, it's working live now. Right here. Okay, we are live.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome, Professor Knight, and thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live. I am making sure that I'm on mute on every other channel here, but we are live on Instagram, on the plant-based, Elevate Plant-Based, and on YouTube, on my personal YouTube. So wherever you're watching, guys, make sure that you put your comments and we can see them here if you have any questions. Now, how are you, Professor Knight?
I'm pretty hot, actually, given that we're in the worst heat wave that Europe has ever had, really, this summer. And I'm from Australia, a very hot country, but we all have air conditioners and much of Europe is not built for the new climate. How are you doing, Chantal?
I'm good. It is summer here too, and it's very warm as well. But thankfully, I have the aircon because Portugal, not very well insulated, but most offices will have the aircon. So I'm lucky to have one, and so I'm dealing with it. But it's true that without it, I would die. It's just too much, and they don't build for the heat here or for the cold, to be honest.
I'm talking to you from England, and over here the buildings are built generally to keep the heat in, not to keep the heat out. So, and we of course don't have air conditioning.
Yeah, I hear you. So we're struggling, both of us here. Okay, so I'm very excited about doing this live because obviously we are a couple of months away from our Elevate Plant-Based conference in Braga. Last year you were here, you did 2 presentations. This year you'll join us again. We will do 1 presentation and you will be on a few panels. So I'm really excited about that. Plus we have a party that we have to schedule. And so, yeah, it's going to be fun. And I saw your newsletter and I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually do a live because your latest research, I mean, it was a meta-analysis of a few papers that you were doing, correct?
Yes, it was a sort of a systematic survey looking for all the evidence that exists in the scientific literature about the digestibility of plant-based diets for dogs and cats, because they've descended from carnivorous animals, and critics worry that they are not adequately able to digest plant-based materials because they've got shorter intestinal tracts. There's a lot of fibrous materials within plant-based ingredients. So I wanted to see what the evidence was. Can dogs and cats actually digest plant-based diets and receive all the necessary nutrients from those diets?
Brilliant. So before we get into the study, can we just actually give everybody a little background about you? How did you get into this field? You obviously studied to become a veterinarian doctor and then decided to actually pursue academia and research. So I'd like to know a little bit that the journey, so for people to get to know you and start following you with that in mind as well.
Great. So I worked in small animal veterinary clinical practice for nearly a decade. I often wondered what the health implications might be of feeding a plant-based diet to dogs and cats, because we know that in order to address the challenges of climate change, which we've just been talking about with the heat wave going on in Europe at the moment, and also the destruction of the planetary natural environment, we need to move toward more sustainable societies. And a big part of that is the food system. Changing what we eat is something that we can all do immediately, unlike changing to new sources of energy, changing transportation, most of which is for work, really, or other purposes that are really difficult to change. But we can change our diets. So the focus so far has always been on more sustainable diets for people, not for pets. And I wondered, when I was in veterinary practice, could dogs and cats be healthily maintained on these, and what would the environmental benefits be? And I wasn't able to really do anything about it because I was too busy working as a vet. But later I entered academia. I went to one of the world's largest veterinary schools and spent 2 years working in the Caribbean, which was an amazing place. And I had lots of adventures out there, and we all worked very hard as well. And then I came back to the University of Winchester in the United Kingdom and set up a Centre for Animal Welfare and ran that for nearly a decade as well. And late in that period, I finally got the opportunity to research this topic in detail. I got some research funding that enabled me to hire some help. So I actually had time to focus on this area. And I now have a couple of non-profit organisations based in London and a small team of people. And we focus mostly on doing research about plant-based diets. So we've researched key aspects like what are the health outcomes for dogs and cats when these diets are fed, what are the environmental benefits, do they actually enjoy these diets, and what are the behavioural indicators when they consume these diets. Recently, what is the digestibility of these diets for dogs and cats? And we have other really interesting research coming in this area as well. So now I get to work on this incredibly important topic virtually full-time, but I also get to support a range of other key animal welfare issues as well. I'm now a veterinary professor of animal welfare. I'm affiliated with 3 universities and an internationally accredited specialist in animal welfare. So I use all of that along with assistance to help me to support a range of other animal advocacy campaigns on key strategic issues around the world. But most of what I focus on is plant-based diets because the potential benefits are incredible. When we talk about the environmental aspects, I can show you that. Virtually nobody else is working on this. We have kind of one other advocate working on this full-time at the moment outside of pet food companies. And this incredible opportunity now exists with the advent of the new nutritionally sound vegan diets that are available mostly from online vendors. The opportunity exists now to make a huge difference in this area for the environment, for farmed animal welfare, and even potentially for the health of our dogs and cats. So that's why I focus on it.
Brilliant. Actually, this weekend I thought about you because I was at this vegan festival and there was a gentleman that was selling treats for cats and dogs, and they were all plant-based. And my dog will not eat the actual fruit or a vegetable, but in the treat, she absolutely loved it. She couldn't stop eating it. So that was really nice to see. It was beetroot. So it's very good for her, and to take a break from, she's got a lot of allergies. So it's very tough for me to actually feed her just plants. One of the 5 dogs, the other dogs are eating plant-based food and they're fine, but she really struggles. And this dog is a pure carnivore. Like she drives me nuts. So you can imagine for a vegan to having to compromise with the dog. It's like, okay, but you want them to be healthy, so you have to like go halfway. But there is an impact, and I'm fully aware of that. So when I find treats that are plant-based or food that is plant-based, like the Benevo now makes the wet food in the can that is for dogs and cats. So obviously it's fortified with things like taurine for the cats. She likes it, and those options are already taking away from animal products, because a lot of people think, for better of the good, when it comes to health, the byproduct of the meat industry is not necessarily healthy either, but on the other side, actually animal products, animal food or dog and cats food made from animal products, it's like a whole another industry on its own, right? So it's like we are talking billions of animals between the consumption for humans and pets. So as you said, the impact on the planet is massive, and we really don't think about it. We rarely think about what we are doing. So imagine for our pets, right?
Yeah, the most recent study that I published prior to the digestibility one actually calculated that the impact of the diet of an average dog is quite a lot bigger than the impact of a diet of an average person considered worldwide. It's about a 40% difference. A dog consumes on average about 13 farmed land animals each year, and a person consumes 9. So if we want to be having the biggest positive impact in reducing greenhouse gases, deforestation, freshwater use and pollution and so on, and saving farmed land animals, it does quite a lot more good on average to transition the average dog than the average person. So Now, if you are a dog owner, you for some reason you don't want to try plant-based diets, well, you might be able to get just as much benefit and even more by switching your pet's diet, to be honest. I would prioritize that first. Hopefully you can do your own diet as well and achieve the benefits of that for yourself as well as for the environment and farmed animals. But don't neglect your pet's diets, because certainly an average sized dog or larger is going to have a really big impact actually on farmed animal consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. And there are also sometimes some health benefits as well. With respect to most of the health outcomes, there aren't really significant differences, but there do seem to be consistent benefits in a couple of areas. One area seems to relate to not consuming animal-sourced allergens in the diet, and these are the most common dietary allergens actually in dogs. They're responsible for about 80% of all dietary allergens in dogs. So when we cut those out, you very often see benefits in terms of less itchy skin, less itchy ear canals, less gastrointestinal problems. These are really common, and they significantly impact quality of life for many dogs. The other benefit seems to be that dogs and cats that are overweight and obese, that's nearly half of all dogs and cats today, seem to consistently slim down and achieve a more normal body weight and have associated improvements in mobility and a reduction in musculoskeletal problems. So these animals seem to be having better quality of life as well. So, as I say, in most respects there aren't differences, but there do seem to be those benefits which seem to be consistent across multiple studies. So that's really exciting for pet carers.
Incredible. I wanted to actually put a link to the study. I put it here because apparently I can post it on Instagram now, which is great. Confirm. Very good. I put the link there on our Instagram live so people can see the study, and it's already on YouTube as well. Okay, so let's get into the study. Just as so this is an excellent paper. So you're discussing if there is a difference between digestibility of vegan and vegetarian diets in dogs and cats, and your review basically investigated whether these diets are actually positive for cats and dogs, because it is a common criticism that that's not the case. And the study design wasn't an experiment, it's just a systematic review. And you looked at 31 studies, 22 of them were dogs and 2 were cats, and 7 were relevant to both. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with the cats, there were 9 studies in total, for example. But yeah, that's correct. 31 studies in total in the systematic review.
Okay. And you were looking at dry matter digestibility, protein digestibility, fat digestibility, energy, amino acid availability, and different plant protein sources, and then the various processing methods that go into the food and how those impact the availability of the nutrients for our furry friends. So what are the main findings of your research then?
There didn't seem to be really very much difference in the digestibility of the diets overall, or of the main nutrients, in particular protein, or of the main ingredients, things particularly soya protein was the most common one. There didn't really seem to be differences. Nothing was perfect. The digestibility of most diets or major ingredients was around about 80 to 90%, but there weren't really a lot of differences actually between the meat-based ones and the plant-based ones. So the common fears that many people have that these animals evolved from carnivorous species and they won't be able to digest plant-based nutrients, even if we design diets that include all necessary nutrients, that fear seems to be unfounded. Modern commercial vegan pet foods do include all necessary nutrients. The companies work with nutritional specialists to make sure they're fully supplemented. And what this latest study shows is that all those nutrients are being effectively digested. There isn't a difference on average between the digestibility of plant-based diets or ingredients and meat-based ones. So that's really good news. People don't need to worry about that point anymore.
Brilliant. So, given that you have found that there is no difference really between the two brands, what misconceptions you find in the about vegan pet food that really frustrates you when it comes to conversations with people?
Yeah, the most common thing is that people don't realize that nutrients are not the same as ingredients. People understandably and reasonably assume that cats and dogs need to eat meat because they evolved from carnivorous species. But there's a couple of things they don't know. One is that the diet of modern domesticated dogs and cats, 90% of the pet food consumed is dry kibble. Nearly 50% of that is actually plant-based material anyway. More and more plant-based ingredients have been creeping into meat-based pet food over time, and nearly half of it is now plant-based. There's also many unnatural additives, including nutritional supplements, flavorants, colorants, preservatives that are added into these diets. The animal-based ingredients are often from species that their ancestors would not have naturally hunted. And this whole very unnatural formulation is packaged up into tins or packets and fed at predictable times every day. So people are assuming that dogs and cats need to eat meat and that this is natural. As a matter of fact, they're already consuming a huge amount of plant-based material and other unnatural additives in an overall diet and feeding regime, which is very far removed from any natural diet of an ancestral dog or cat. Yeah. What dogs and cats need biologically is certain specific things. Most of all, they need a set of dietary nutrients. There are essential nutrients that dogs and cats need, but there's no scientific reason why you can't manufacture a diet to include all of those essential nutrients. The naturally occurring nutrients in meat-based diets, some of those get quite badly damaged by the high temperatures and pressures used in modern pet food processing, particularly fragile nutrients such as vitamins and amino acids. So after processing of meat-based pet food is finished, the companies have to supplement those diets with synthetic nutrients to make sure they're nutritionally sound. Companies producing plant-based diets do exactly the same thing. So all of the diets are supplemented. And what they need biologically is all of those nutrients to be included. They don't need meat or any other particular ingredient. The second thing they would need is for these diets to be adequately digestible so that even if the nutrients are there, we can be confident that the dogs and cats are going to be able to digest and absorb them and be healthy. And that, of course, is what the latest study just investigated in great detail. Are these diets generally as digestible? And the answer is yes, they are. So that's good news. And then, finally, we have the health outcomes. The most important thing really is not what's going into the animal, it's what are the outcomes? Are the animals healthy after all those nutrients have reacted with their biochemistry in ways that are complicated? We may not always fully understand, but we can always assess the health outcomes for the animals. And there have been an increasing number of these studies, quite a lot now in dogs, more than 10 of these in dogs, and a smaller but consistent body of studies in cats as well, actually showing good health outcomes equivalent nearly all of the time and better in a small number of cases when these plant-based diets are used. And that kind of makes sense when you feed diets that include all necessary nutrients, but you reduce dietary hazards. The most common hazards are animal-sourced allergens in animals that are sensitive or allergic. And then another hazard seems to be excessive calories in meat-based diets. And when you provide a healthier number of calories, we seem to get reductions in excessive body weight. So those are the consistent benefits. There was one particularly exciting study, actually, which showed that dogs fed plant-based diets seem to be living 1.5 years longer. And this is a study that came from the other main research group working in this area, which is at Guelph Veterinary School in Canada. So this study showed that dogs fed vegan diets were living 1.5 years longer on average. And that's equivalent to a person living just over a decade of extra life. So that's not a small amount. That's obviously incredibly significant. So it's exciting to think that these diets could be offering these dogs all of this extra time and that they could also have better quality of life, given that so many of them do suffer from itchy skin, ear canals, gastrointestinal problems, reduced mobility, being overweight and obese, and so on.
That is true. And I always wondered one thing, right? When it comes to cats in particular, cats are quite delicate, actually. People don't think about it, but they do tend to suffer more with kidney issues. And I wonder if actually switching them to protein that is not as aggressive from plants might be better for them if they are domesticated and not actually hunting. Because I feel like one negative thing about the food that is given to cats with the preface, they of course they like, and they do like meat. I mean, yeah, they go crazy. They don't go as crazy for the vegan food. I know because I'm pet sitting vegan cats, and they don't love the food, um they are pretty dehydrated in comparison to a wild cat that maybe kills a prey. Because when they kill a prey, they eat, they also hydrate their body. And we know that, at least in human nutrition, so you can correct me if I'm wrong by assuming that this would be the case in animal nutrition too. But in human nutrition, when we have too much protein and we overload our kidneys, we need to make sure that we stay hydrated and we drink a lot of water, also to balance out our electrolytes. I'm thinking that the same with pets, which is why when they eat these dry kibbles, especially from animal products, and they don't hydrate well, because cats don't love to drink water as much, they actually can overburden the kidneys, which is probably why we see so many cats having kidney issues.
Yeah, dehydration is much more associated with dry diets, such as dry kibble. Cats consuming wet diets of any kind, whether it's a natural kill of a prey animal in the wild or whether it's out of a tin, are going to get more fluid, which will help with hydration. Old cats in domesticated settings certainly are living quite a long time now compared to how long they used to live. And with relative old age, there are increases in conditions such as kidney disease, also some kinds of cancer as well. And with kidney disease, one of the things we often try to do is address dehydration, because there often is excessive urination and dehydration resulting from that. So there are things that people can do if they have those cats to try to help with dehydration. Certainly feeding wet food rather than dry is likely to help, or if cat's loving a certain type of dry food, adding water to it, using running water fountains, because the sound of running water can encourage drinking more than just standing water. If there's no heart disease, slightly salty diets can help. So there are things that can be done. And if someone does have a cat that they feel might be suffering from dehydration, it would be good to talk to their vet about it. They can assess it, guide them on how to assess this at home. And if there's a serious incident, then of course the animal can come into the clinic and be rehydrated using fluids.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have a question about the types of proteins, since we're talking about proteins anyway. In the systematic review, you looked across different protein sources within the plant-based. So you had soy, pea, rice, legumes, microbial protein, grains, and fermented protein. Can you just tell me which ones? How did they rate for the digestibility and assimilation of from our pets?
I mean, that kind of detailed information would be in the actual study. I can tell you that, broadly speaking, the digestibility of most of these components was in the range of sort of 80 to 90%, which was comparable to the meat-based ingredients as well that we used in the meat-based diets. And, I wouldn't necessarily say that one was better than another. They all were broadly fine, actually, and comparable to the meat-based diets. If people want to see the details of the numbers on the specific proteins, they would have to look that up in the actual study.
Okay, brilliant. And when it came to, I already mentioned actually this, but you felt that by adding nutrients to the diet after cooking, because obviously we do lose nutrients, micronutrients. You felt that just by supplementing, it was comparable to the food that people are comfortable giving their pets already?
Yeah, I don't advise that people wanting these benefits from vegan diets go home and try to make homemade diets. Unfortunately, there's been quite a body of studies showing that homemade diets are not normally nutritionally sound, even when people follow recipes and even when people add in nutritional supplements, and even when those people are experts. So it seems really difficult to actually do this well. Instead, I advise people to leave it to pet food companies who hopefully are working with veterinary nutritional specialists to fully supplement the diets with all necessary nutrients, producing their product in manufacturing facilities that are up to at least industrial standard, and can also provide some basic information about steps that they've taken to ensure good quality of their diets and nutritional soundness. If they can't provide any information, won't answer questions, I would say that should be a red flag and people should choose a different company. Finally, people should be checking the packaging and labelling to make sure that it says somewhere that the diet is nutritionally complete for cats or for dogs, and not just intended as a treat or a snack, because they're not usually nutritionally complete.
Yeah, indeed. So I do have a question that is very generic, but I think also gives us a little bit more of a deep dive into the way that we use words and we associate them. So we call our pets obligate carnivores. But is that the same thing as to say that they must eat meat? Because I feel like that's actually not the same. And so if that's the case, how do you explain it to people that that's not the same thing?
Sure. Cats are obligate carnivores. Dogs aren't. They're omnivores. Cats are obligate carnivores because in their natural environments, they have to hunt and kill prey animals in order to obtain sufficient nutrients to be able to survive. This, as I said before, is hardly relevant to modern domesticated cats who are fed diets that include lots of animal body parts from animals they would never naturally hunt, such as animals like fish, cows, pigs, and so on, with many unnatural additives. By the way, nearly half of dry pet food is plant-based material as well. That's not natural for cats, and all fed at predictable times every day. So obligate carnivore is just a biological classification that refers to the fact that they're obliged to eat meat in their natural environments, which, as I say, is not relevant to domesticated cats. Dogs are actually omnivores. They've been co-evolving with our ancestors for the last 20 to 40,000 years. They evolved from wolves, who were carnivores, but we were followed around the landscape as we hunted and gathered. And some of the wolf packs that were following us, looking for leftovers from kills, from hunting parties, and otherwise trying to scavenge, some of those wolves were a bit more confident and had better temperaments and would approach more closely to our human campfires. And some of them would receive scraps of food, and over time they started to collaborate with our ancestors and join our hunting parties and start to understand human body language. For example, dogs are the only animal that seems to understand what it means to point at something. So in the process of doing this, some of those wolves also developed genetic mutations that enable them to get more nutritional benefit from human food scraps. Our ancestors certainly left scraps of meat around, but in between successful kills, we subsisted on starchy root vegetables. That was the staple of our diets. So some of these wolf hybrids developed mutations that enable them to get nutritional benefit from this mixed diet of human food scraps. And they did better than the carnivorous wolves that didn't have those mutations. And so over time, the population changed into modern domesticated dogs who are biologically omnivorous and have evolved to survive on a diet of mixed human food scraps, not just on meat.
Very good. I can actually see. I was picturing it. It makes a lot of sense to me. Let's talk about cats for a moment, because that remains controversial controversial and it will come up all the time. And to be honest with you, I also find myself sometimes in this limbo when I understand giving them nutrients, that they are different when they are indoors, but I cannot help but worry sometimes. However, if there was a major study that could be done, if you got funding for it, given that in this meta-analysis or in this review, you only had 2 really specific to cats, one that was some were mixed, and then the majority were dogs. If you had funding for one major study tomorrow, what feline research would you prioritize?
The most important one with respect to cats would be a health study. It would be a big study of the health outcomes in cats who are fed vegan diets, nutritionally sound vegan diets. At the moment, we have 2 groups of studies. We've got studies that include some clinical data. That's things like blood nutrient levels, clinical data from the animals to assess their health status directly. With the dogs, some of these have involved x-rays of bone density. They have involved clinical examinations of the dogs as well as blood tests. It'd be great to do more of that with cats, but also in really large numbers. The trouble with the existing clinical studies is they're quite expensive to get all that clinical data, so only low numbers of animals have been included, relatively low numbers. We also have the other group of studies, which are surveys of hundreds or thousands of pet carers, asking them about their opinions, but also more objective data, the number of times they had to visit the vet, whether they had to use any kind of medication in the last year, what the veterinary assessment of health of their animals is. Anyway, we have this survey data, which is pretty cheap to get, and so we can include really large numbers, but many people worry it's not as certain as clinical data. So it'd be great to combine the 2 to be able to have a study involving more clinical data, but also really large numbers at the same time. There are suggestions of other health benefits from some of the studies, but because the numbers have been too small, we haven't been able to really find out. So, a larger study would enable that to be done.
Yeah, I agree. So when it comes to the current studies that are available and your work in general, what evidence do you think we could use to convince a vet, for example, that a plant-based diet does deserve a serious look and consideration?
Yeah, vets need to know 2 things. One is that in the last few years, commercial pet food companies have now produced plant-based diets which are nutritionally sound. They're working with veterinary nutritional specialists and supplementing them. So most people feeding vegan diets are no longer trying to feed homemade diets, and vets have rightly been skeptical and worried about these diets because homemade diets for decades have been produced of all different kinds, and they're normally nutritionally unsound, and vets have had to pick up the pieces, so they're naturally skeptical. What vets don't know is that most people feeding these diets today are feeding commercial ones which are nutritionally sound. The second thing vets need to know is that just in the last few years, there's been an explosion of new research in this area, exploring health outcomes, palatability outcomes, digestibility, environmental aspects, and so on. And those studies have made a very compelling case, actually, for the use of these diets. No body of evidence is perfect, but it's clear now that there seem to be at least consistent, at least equivalent health outcomes in most respects, and maybe even improved health outcomes in some key respects when these diets are used, providing that they are nutritionally sound diets. And of course, you just need to remind vets then that what animals need biologically is a certain set of essential dietary nutrients. They don't need meat or any other particular ingredient. And providing the diets are adequately digestible, which is what the latest study now shows, you would have no reason not to expect health outcomes to be just as good. And if you remove dietary hazards, such as animal-sourced allergens in allergic or sensitive animals, or pathogens in raw meat diets, because there are a huge number of potential pathogens, and more than 80 studies now show increased pathogenic risk associated with those diets. So if you remove dietary hazards, you might even see some health improvements in certain areas. And this is exactly what the studies have been showing us. So most vets will understand the reasoning of that, and they will see the strength of the evidence in this area and will be willing to update their knowledge and opinions. And indeed, it is a professional obligation to try to stay up to date and to be willing to adopt positions based upon scientific evidence. And when evidence, new evidence emerges or scientific understanding of a field changes, vets do have an obligation to stay up to date. Most vets are willing to do this. Not all. There's a small proportion of vets who are closed-minded and not willing to look at the scientific evidence on this issue. They obviously have personal biases against plant-based diets, but most vets will be willing to look at the evidence, providing it's reasonably presented to them. Sadly, vets are often really busy, and if you give them scientific papers, they won't have time to read them. But if you give them the cover page, which has the abstract of the scientific paper, they might be willing to look at a few of those. They might have time to do that. So that's what I recommend.
That's brilliant. Actually, I had a question that you answered perfectly. I was going to say, do you think the resistance that comes from vets is embedded in science and facts, or more that resistance is more because of tradition? And I think you answered by saying it's tradition. They are just traditionally taught in a certain way, and they don't want to stray from it. And sometimes it's due to time, not having the time to look at science. Other times it's because they would be, the off one out, that they don't like to be odd. And I guess my next question would be, do you think that plant-based nutrition should be taught in vet schools?
Absolutely. Plant-based nutrition should be taught in vet schools because this is one of the most powerful ways that we can benefit animal welfare, and certainly one of the most powerful ways that we can benefit the environment too. And sustainability of the food system is becoming a really important issue today, with climate change accelerating and mass destruction currently underway because of wildfires across Europe and North America. And this happens every summer in Australia too, where I'm originally from. We're living through the 6th mass extinction event since fossil records began. This means that more than half of all living creatures on the planet are being wiped out within a fairly short period of geological time, just a few human lifetimes. If that's not considered compelling enough reason to address this issue, I don't know what would be. Obviously, this should be included within curricula and taught within veterinary schools.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a this hypothesis for you to think about. So let's say we have 2 brands of food. One is vegan, the other one is standard animal product. But we remove the labels from these packages, so the person that is reviewing them wouldn't know what they are. And in the lab, both measurements showed that they were equally digestible, nutritionally sound, and adequate. Do you think people will still find scientific reasoning to remain, attached to the one that they've always known, or would this be actually a good evidence that both food are adequate, and that a vegan diet can actually be as adequate and as a animal one? And has this been done already?
I think sort of the most important test subjects are actually the dogs and the cats. In a sense, we know that nutritionally they can be equivalent. The health outcomes seem to be equivalent, or sometimes slightly better. But what do the dogs and cats think about if you supply them with 2 different bowls, and what will they do? So this has been studied. There have been a series of smaller studies, and we did a very large-scale study a few years ago. So we had more than 2,300 dogs and 1,100 cats, and we studied their behaviour at feeding time. So we were looking for signs that they liked or disliked their food. And we studied every known indicator. So that was 10 behavioural signs in dogs and 15 in cats. For dogs, it was things like whether they would race up to their food bowl, jump up and down, bark, salivate, guard their food bowl. For cats, they did lots of sniffing and flicking of tails and twitching of ears and investigating and licking of lips and faces and food bowls. They're much more subtle. But by studying their behaviour and comparing their behavioural signs with previous studies and with other behavioural signs in the same study, we were able to work out which of these were positive indicators and which were negative indicators showing they liked or disliked their foods. Once we did that, then we were able to work out how these varied between the different diets. And then we analysed it statistically. So it was a complicated study. And once we had done all that work, we found no significant difference on average. There were one or two minor differences, but across the board, there didn't seem to be any significant differences between the diet groups. It makes sense in a way if you bear in mind that companies producing, say, plant-based diets that are not liked by dogs and cats would rapidly go out of business, because dogs and cats are not going to be polite in the same way that people might be and eat something that they didn't like. They're just going to refuse to eat it. So they do actually have to like the product for the company to succeed and stay in business. And clearly there are a growing number of these companies, and some of them have been around for years. Obviously, the dogs and cats like their products adequately. So there you go. Individual pets may have personalities and preferences just like people do, but when you take averages from thousands, you get no significant difference when you study their behaviour in great detail. And until we learn to actually talk to them directly, that I think is about the best that we can do in finding out what they're really thinking.
Yeah. So, Professor Knight, what do you have in the works right now, like the next steps to support the work you've done so far?
We've got several key things underway at the moment. One is another study of nutritional soundness, a big one, looking at how the plant-based diets compare to meat-based diets on a large scale. We already have one of these that showed good results for the plant-based diets, so this is another one. Even more important, though, I think, is we have a study from which described the year 2018, which showed massive environmental benefits when plant-based diets are fed to dogs and cats. It seems that around about 9% of all the farmed land animals consumed in the world are consumed for pets, not people. And in high-income countries, that's more like 20%. If plant-based diets were used instead and those animals were no longer being farmed, we would be saving at least 7 billion farmed land animals per year from slaughter, more greenhouse gases than produced by the entire United Kingdom, and enough food energy to feed 450 million people or the whole of Europe. So those are really huge environmental benefits offered by plant-based diets for pets. However, they relate to the year 2018. Since then, consumption by all groups has increased, and the consumption by pets has gone up faster than people because their populations are growing more quickly. So another study updates all those results to the year 2024. We hope to have that one published soon. It seems that the environmental benefits are likely to be even bigger than I found in 2018. And then another one looks at the cost implications for pet carers of feeding these diets. These diets are not the cheapest diets on the market. Those would be the ones that are full of animal byproducts, using the lowest quality ingredients. Any diets that offer some kind of benefit above the cheapest level of ingredients is going to cost a little more. There are diets which are designed for different breeds, life stages, try to have certain health benefits, or are more sustainable. They're all going to not be the budget diets. They cost a little bit more. So plant-based diets cost a little bit more on average too. But what people often forget is that other studies show that if you feed these diets, you're likely to need to see the vet less often and use medication less and have less illness. And we have those numbers already from existing studies. But what no one has done is worked out, what does that mean for the cost of illness? Cost of illness is something that is established within human public health, but no one's applied it to veterinary care yet. So we have studies at the moment which are examining what happens when you also add in the changes in the cost of veterinary care for dogs and cats fed nutritionally sound plant-based diets. Turns out that the cost difference between feeding meat-based and plant-based diets pretty much disappears. In some cases, it's going to be slightly more expensive to feed plant-based diets, but it could be less than the cost of a cup of coffee per week or per 6 months. And in other cases, it seems that actually there's a small cost saving associated with feeding plant-based diets. So, even if someone wasn't that impressed by the idea of having an animal that's less ill, not having to deal with the illness, see the vet, just the cost implications alone are worth thinking about for pet carers. So yeah, there are more exciting studies coming in this field. So stay tuned. They continue to appear across my social media when they come out.
Yeah. I just wonder if we are giving these options to animals and they are going to see the vet less. Do you think this will stop vets from recommending the food? Because their business is like in the human allopathic world. It's based on seeing patients.
That's kind of like asking, do we think doctors are going to not recommend things likely to result improvements in human health? In general, that's not true, and it's in general not going to be true with vets either. There are concerns that veterinary clinics are increasingly being bought up by corporations, especially in the United Kingdom, whose primary motive is to generate a profit for their shareholders. However, vets are professionals and swear oaths to uphold animal welfare as their primary duty and can face professional sanctions if they seriously violate that. So just as human doctors, the fact that their practice may be owned by a corporation is not going to stop them trying to uphold animal welfare as their first duty.
Okay, that's reassuring. Although I know that we're navigating murky waters here. As a naturopath, I see it. But thank you so much. That was such a good review. I think studies like this are definitely helpful, and I look forward to having you here in Portugal in October to share a little bit more, especially with your fun presentations that always share a little bit of your personal journey, spending time on the island, not focusing so much on dangerous stuff, but more like sports.
Yep. I've traveled a lot and worked at one of the biggest vet schools in the world in the Caribbean and had all sorts of interesting adventures out there in between the work, for sure.
Yeah,
I look forward to talking about those if you let me. I'll talk all night about those sorts of things.
Now, don't worry, we'll give you a drink, maybe alcohol-free, but drink. You will again have your eyes wide open at my amount of food that I consume, like last year, and and then we will dance, and then you can tell all your stories. We always
fantastic. I hope some of your listeners will join us in Portugal when the time comes and help us to eat some of that food, because I'm pretty sure I can't eat it all by myself, unfortunately.
No, but don't worry, I'm here.
Good, because I was worried.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Have a great day.
Bye, you too.
Bye-bye.